and just start off with like some basic introductions while people start trickling in. Yeah, so again, thank you everyone for joining. I am Naimisha Murthy, and I'm the creator of Products by Women. We are an inclusive, diverse global community, making skill-based jobs, training opportunities, and mentorship more accessible for women around the world. We've hosted a bunch of events across the last 2 years, and have another event which is coming up on November 9th. So if you are interested in exploring more events like these, do check out our website at productsbywomen.com. There are also a bunch of plenty of other resources that are available out there. So check that out. I will drop that information once the session kicks off. So check all that information out there. A few housekeeping tips before we do get started. This event is being recorded, so feel free to check out our YouTube channel in a couple of days to get a recording of this session. And if you are unsure of being on camera, do feel free to switch it off. And yeah, sit back and relax, and you don't have to worry about taking notes. If you do have any questions, do drop them in the chat box. McKenna will be taking them at the end of the session if she has time. If she does not get to it, do reach out to her on LinkedIn, on Instagram. She has presence all of there. She'll probably share where you can reach out to her as well. I do want to say a big thank you and a congratulations to Michelle from Flick, who will be sharing more about what they do, for being here and partnering with us for this event. A little bit more about us. In the last 2 years, we've powered a bunch of accessible resources, just like this event, like I mentioned to you, and have had about 12,000 learners, hosted over 100 plus events, and have about 20,000 subscribers from around the world. So really, thank you. And with that, I wanted to share it. I want to pass the ball to Michelle to say a quick hello, talk to us a little bit about what she's been up to, and then we'll kick it off from there.
Hey everyone, I'm Michelle. I'll definitely keep it short. I am the founder of Flick. We are a platform and community hub for female leaders and learners from all across the world to connect via meaningful apprenticeships or career experiences. And we're actually hiring, so I'll drop that. I'll drop that link below, because we were recently acquired, and so now we're going into expansion mode again. So we have 6 roles that we're hiring for, and I'll drop the link below. And I'm super excited to be partnering on this with Naimisha and Products by Women. As she said, we've been partnering on events for a while now, and super grateful to have had Naimisha be with us from the start and be a supporter from the start. So I'll drop that link below, and I am excited to pass it off to our speaker today, McKenna.
Hi everyone, I am McKenna, and we're going to talk about virtual interviewing. So let me get my slides up. All right, cool. So as I said, McKenna, and I'm going to talk to you about virtual interviewing. I have managed, oh, can't do that slide. I've managed international teams for years, and so inherently virtual, and have done a lot of interviewing on that side of the table. And then in the pandemic, I moved country and had to move job, and have done a lot of interviewing on the other side of the table subsequently. I also have a forthcoming book on virtual leadership and how to use empathy to be a better remote leader. So this is a topic I have thought a lot about. Before we really dive in, I want to get an idea of y'all's experience with virtual interviewing. So we have a poll, which is cue, Naimisha. How many of you have interviewed for a new role remotely? And how many of you have been the interviewer? All right, I'm going to end the poll. It looks like we have a wide experience, and people who have not done it on both sides of the table, which is great, because I'm pretty sure we all will going forward. Here are the results. let's keep moving. All right, so acing remote interviews, how to present your best self. Interviewing is hard. Virtual interviewing is even harder. You want to put your best self out there, but the technology hasn't really caught up to what in-person communication gives all of us when we're talking together. So how are we going to tackle this? First, we're going to talk about empathy and how that affects all virtual communications, but of course, in particular, interviews. Then we'll talk about the dehumanization of remote work, which is really the foundation of all of the things we can do better. How to humanize your interview, both from your perspective and from your interviewers. And then if we have time, your online identity and how to maximize it. So empathy is often defined as the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. And in its essence, it's how to be a successful human being in a community, which means taking the other person's perspective and understanding what they're feeling. Everyone mostly spends their time thinking about themselves. And if you add physical distance in the case of a virtual setting, that gets even worse, and our ability to take the other person's perspective is harder. So changing that and being able to take their point of view is a key skill in virtual interviewing. I'm going to use the word empathy for simplicity's sake, but I really mean what's called cognitive empathy, which is figuring out what the other party is feeling and why. So why is virtual work dehumanizing? When you take away the physical context that we're all used to of communication and the millions of signals you get from someone speaking, their pace of speech, their hand gestures, their facial expressions, we change our relationship to the people we come into contact with. In a work situation, if we bring this all down to a 2D avatar popping up on your Slack, you're maybe only thinking about what they can do for you and not about them as a human. One-on-one communication or even group communication is incredibly multi-layered. And if you think of it as a spectrum, there's no way text-based communication can compete. So it's been said that when communicating about feelings and attitudes, words account for only 7% of the information actually conveyed. And in a digital first world, we aren't so good at that. So there's one study that I love to quote. It was a summer camp at UCLA, and they took teenagers, 6th graders, and they divided them into 2 groups. And the first group, they took away all their devices, no screens of any kind. And the second group, they left them alone, which for 6th graders, that's a pretty good amount of screen time. And at the end of a week, they tested their ability to infer emotional states from people's pictures. So you look at a picture and you say, oh, I think that person's happy or sad. And the group that had their devices removed improved dramatically over the other group. And this is really important when we think about virtual work and virtual interviewing, which is the pictures and digital and social media make it harder for us to understand what people's emotions are conveying. And so we have to mitigate for that. How does this affect interviews? Oh, I'm not sure I wanted to share this. I wanted to ask you first. For those of you who interviewed, I'd love to hear what you think is the hardest part about virtual interviews. And I hopefully will be able to tailor my talk to that. If you want to comment, if not, I'll launch in. All right, no comments. So I think you would all agree.
I think someone raised their hand.
Oh, they raised their hand.
If Sylvia wants to come off mute.
Oh, 2 participants raised their hand. No, wonderful. It's hand raising.
Sylvia, go for it.
Yeah.
Sylvia,
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I just want to say I had an interview actually this Saturday, and the hardest part was not doing eye contact with anyone and trying to look straight to the camera. And then of course, like reviewing my video many, many times and seeing how many times I was blinking, etc. And they were using some algorithm to test as well how I was looking at the camera. So it was just really hard because I couldn't gauge anyone's opinion, and I just had to pretend someone was there, and that was extremely difficult.
Yeah, it is. It's like being in a play or something, for sure.
Yeah.
Jessie,
you can go ahead.
Yeah, I think my challenge is making sure that they understand the message I'm conveying, because I'm someone that communicates a lot with body language and I move my hands a lot when I talk, and I notice that doesn't get captured in the frame, or even when I'm looking at someone and I'm doing right now, I'm looking at the screen instead of looking at the camera, because that makes like more eye contact. But then when you look at the camera, it looks like you're actually looking at the person. So those little challenges.
Not so little, very serious concerns, right? They're hard. All of these things are really hard to master. Let's launch in. I'm going to talk about all those things, except for the algorithm where they were checking out your ability to do this. I may come back to you privately on that one. I'm curious. So as we've talked about, they can feel unnatural. You don't have the same overlap in speaking. You don't know what the other person can see. They're squeezed into people's days, as we know. Like, you might go from an interview right into another meeting. There's no going to their office and creating that boundary that tells you this is a different moment in your day and preparing you for that. Your nonverbal cues, as Jesse said, are squelched. If you're someone who communicates with hand gestures, you don't know how much that is coming across. And this is also true for the interviewer. It's both what they're conveying to you and what you're conveying to them. Imagine if you're speaking to your would-be manager and you're expecting them to tell you with their words and their pace, if they're hyper or calm or how they react to things, and you're just not getting that information from them. And then lastly, Zoom is exhausting, which is, a little bit the concept of who am I supposed to be looking at? You want to be making eye contact, but you also want to be trying to see what other people's faces are saying. This is incredibly complicated and taxing for your brain. And in a group meeting, it's even harder, because those people that are supposed to be in your peripheral vision, and your brain should be ignoring those inputs to some degree, but they can't, because it's right there in front of you and it's no longer your peripheral vision. So let's talk about what we can do about the dehumanization of virtual, because I think you all know what the issues are. So they can feel unnatural. And the goal of the interview is to make it feel natural for the other party, right? You want them to feel like this is a great conversation and you're telling really interesting stories about your past. So I've noticed, and I'm sure many of you have as well, recently interviews have become like a lot more structured. And I think a lot of this is to remove bias, and that's a great thing, but it can also be more demanding, I think, for the interviewer. So you have to be even more structured. I'm sure all of you have heard the STAR method, the situation, task, action, result, which is a great structure to begin with. But I think you need to level up when you're doing it virtually and kind of do the old public speaking thing, which is tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them, like a table of contents and a summary, so they know exactly how to follow along with the points of your story and what the takeaway should be. You also want to practice your storytelling in the way that you're like a star, right? This is like being on camera, and you want to be able to do this with more energy, more differentiation in pitch and tone. Studies have shown that people who vary their tone, their pace, their volume come off as more credible and more intelligent. Obviously, that's something you want to take advantage of if you can. Slowing down. This helps with people being able to understand you more. It gives you more time to see what they're doing and react to it. You can't do it maybe in a split second anymore because you're not getting the same inputs for their nonverbal cues. And then lastly, and you make it more unnatural to make it more natural, which is to say you should record yourself. Practice your interview questions or anything and see where your hands fall within the frame. What do you sound like? That you might have to have a friend do. What does your background look like? What does your shirt look like? If I was doing this presentation right now, all against a white background, and my shirt kind of blends in, it's not a huge deal, but it can be a little distracting to see something like that. So you want to make it a little more unnatural for you to get better. So they're squeezed into people's days. We all know meetings have exploded during the pandemic and work from home. And you want to be able to create architecture around the experience. Neuroarchitecture is a study of how your environment affects your brain, which tells us that it really doesn't make a huge difference in your performance, the environment you're in. So whatever you can do to create an environment, which means, putting on shoes if you normally work barefoot, cleaning off your desktop. Maybe it's doing Superman pose before. I understand that's been debunked, but it's a change of pace and it tells you this is a different part of your day. Obviously, if you can schedule your meetings so that you have a little breathing time before, that's great, but that may not be possible. Your nonverbal cues are squelched, as we've discussed. So we'll start with empathetic listening. People often say that listening and empathy are really kind of the same thing, which is not the whole story on empathy, but it's hugely important. And there's two aspects to this. There's actually listening to what the other person is saying, which is both with your ears and taking in as many nonverbal cues as you can. And there's also making the other person feel heard. Again, this can be a little bit harder in virtual because you don't have that opportunity to overlap your speech, which in many languages, particularly American English, overlapping and interrupting is how we convey that we're listening. So what's called a murmur of assent, yes, I know what you mean. You know, you definitely want to keep doing that, but more of the yes, nodding, not the I know what you mean, because that's just going to slow down the flow of the conversation. Next, obviously, you want to give really great answers. But another way to think of your answers is how do they portray you as a great person to work with remotely? We know that remote work loosens connections between different teams. So can you weave that into your story, how you did a great job at cross-functional teamwork? We know that remote work makes communication harder and getting people to understand things transparently. So how can you tell stories in which you are a great communicator and you told things transparently to other people across your organization? And then lastly, and then focus on your bonding cues. So again, many of your nonverbal cues are squelched, but there are still some there. So thinking about the way that they lean in, the way that they pace themselves, how much excitement you're getting from any facial expressions you're getting, which is a part of slowing down. Look for those cues, try to react to them, and pay attention when you're in any meeting to the things you can see and start to recognize, so that when you're in an unfamiliar setting, you'll be looking at people, a change in head tilt, a change in pace that might tell you if they're getting more or less interested. This is really hard if people are taking notes, but sometimes the way their questions are phrased might give you clues about how to gauge, how to engage them more or less if it's going really well. And that might be, questions that are really reflective of what you've said, repeating things back to you. That implies they're listening to you. If they're flying through and you're moving through rote questions, you might have lost their attention, and it might be time to think about ways that you can change your delivery to be more engaging. Lastly, this is sort of related to your nonverbal cues, but you want to ask great questions, obviously. And my feeling on questions is the best ones are the ones that imply whether or not you would take the job or the answer would. But another great type of question when you're trying to form a bond virtually is asking about them. How did you get here? Tell me what skills you have that make you great at this job. Looking for them to share things about themselves creates a warm, fuzzy feeling. And that warm, fuzzy feeling extends to how they feel about you, the interviewee, even though they're the ones doing the talking. So Zoom is exhausting. I'm sure all of you have been working on this, but I find that I'm constantly trying new things about my energy hygiene, my inputs of caffeine, sleep, being at a standing desk, whatever. And that's particularly true at an interview when you need to be like up and ready to go and having your best energy. I also like phone calls for this. As a candidate, you might not have as much control, but when you can, phone calls really allow you to focus on a narrower set of nonverbal cues. That is the things that you're hearing from their voice, which is easier for your brain to process and doesn't require that sort of back and forth with your eyes that can exhaust you and take away the bandwidth needed to give your great answers. So now we'll talk about how you present yourself. I'm just gonna check how I'm doing for time, okay. So I'm going to flash through some photos, some imagery really quick, and just note it. So what are people seeing and hearing from you? We'll cover the Zoom basics, voice, background, apparel. These things matter. You need to know what's behind the messages you're sending out into the world, and be thoughtful about how the actions you're taking are impacting the people that you're interviewing with. obviously you want them to perceive you as smart and intelligent and easy to work with. And if there's anything superficial you can do to improve that, it should be something to consider. Again, it's superficial, and I don't want to tell you to like take away from your individuality or to be some sort of corporate Stepford wife. But it's important that when you make a decision that can be very visible, you note it and you make it conscientiously, as opposed to like accidentally. I have an example. I was interviewing a woman once, and I spent the entire hour wondering if there was a hologram behind her chair, because the chair's coloring blended in with like the green wall behind her. It wasn't virtual. She didn't get the role, not because of the weird background, but it was certainly a distraction for me for basically the entire interview. And she could have done a better job probably if I had been more engaged. So you don't really want to run into situations like that. Also, there's a lot of studies behind the way people perceive you visually affect how they perceive you sort of mentally. There's something called the halo effect, which they've been studying for at least 100 years, which started in the 1920s with soldiers in the army, and superiors rated them on a series of categories, some of which were physical and some of which were intelligence or abilities, competencies, and the results were correlated. So if you were taller, fitter, more attractive, more handsome, your superiors were more likely to rate you as more intelligent and more competent. And the opposite was true as well. So if you can take advantage of this superficial halo effect and show up with your best self in your interview, it's probably something to consider. Also, everything you wear is telling a story. They've also done studies. There's one out of NYU saying that even if they show people pictures of candidates for roles, they showed undergraduates, and they had the same people in what appeared to be expensive tops or inexpensive tops. The undergraduates rated the people in expensive tops as more competent and more intelligent, even in situations where they've been explicitly told to disregard clothing. So your outfit makes a difference as well. So the net result is, you want to make decisions that feel like you and that feel right for you, but that also convey the best person that you can convey of yourself. It also applies to the way your face appears. When in a study, when people were asked to rate the intelligence and competency of financial advisors by looking at their photos, they consistently picked the people with the more smiling faces, even though smiling has nothing to do with your ability as a financial advisor. So if you're like me and you really suffer from resting witchy face, it's something to consider and try to keep a positive upturned look on your face. I'm glad I got that lol, thanks. So another thing to consider is your camera. And you really want to take a clue from a newscaster. This is me at 90% of my screen, and I see this all the time, and I'm sure many of you do as well. And it's disturbing if you're in a one-on-one call to have that person so close. It's very intimate. And this is me at about 1/3 of the screen. It's much more palatable. It's much more conversational. This is about how far a human being would be from you in conversation. You'll also notice that I'm looking at the camera dead on. The way a lot of us work, the camera's below your face, which means you're kind of looking down at the other person. And it's actually a little condescending. It's like how you'd speak to a child. So I insist that everyone lift, just please, if you take nothing else from this conversation, please lift your cameras up. It just makes the whole thing feel much more natural. This is also important if you are doing an interview in a hybrid scenario. I've definitely had calls, and I'm sure you have as well, where the person in the conference room maybe doesn't realize that they're being shown in total, and they're just looking at your face. And so their body language is telling a very strange story. Maybe they're splayed out, maybe they're, I don't know, eating. Anything could happen, and it looks unattractive. So if you're in a conference room and you're doing a hybrid virtual interview, assume they can see everything. So we'll talk about your voice. There's 3 things that I think we want to consider with voice, which are pitch, pace, and diction. Your voice is a critical medium in delivering your messages. Speech patterns paint a very vivid picture of who you are to the people you encounter. And studies have shown that if two people utter the exact same words, but one speaks fast, a little faster, louder, fewer pauses, and greater variation in volume, they'll be judged to be more energetic, knowledgeable, and intelligent. Who doesn't want to be more energetic, knowledgeable, and intelligent? So we'll start with pitch. So pitch is how high or how low the sound of your voice is. And this is the voice concept most studied in terms of business outcomes. For men, it's very clear. There's a big study of 800 CEOs of publicly traded companies, who are all men, and a 25% reduction in the what's called the hertz of your voice. So the 25% reduction in pitch, so it was lower, is correlated with the $187,000 increase in salary. And those CEOs with lower pitches also have longer tenures. This is thought to be evolutionary. Many of our monkey relatives lower their pitch during antagonistic altercations. So does it hold true for women as well? Somewhat. So traditionally female ways of speaking, like a sing-song voice or speaking in a breathy way like Marilyn Monroe, or sentences that end using a questioning tone, I was working on that one, often referred to as upspeak, are seen as less intelligent and less authoritative. And there are some studies that have shown that the pitch application is the same for women as well. There's one example I like from the University of Illinois, where they asked groups to, in a group, rank the items you'd need if you were stranded on the moon. And then the researchers privately asked each member of the group to rank the people in the group to create a hierarchy. And they looked back at videos of the groups as they were discussing these things and found that in the beginning, everyone changes their pitch. Some people raise their pitch, some people lower it. And the people who lower their pitch were seen as at the top of the hierarchy. And this was true both for men and for women. There's also a lower limit for women, which is why I have Kim here, which is called vocal fry. And that is seen as less educated and less competent for women. So it's another reason to slow down, because it's actually what happens when you kind of run out of air. I will not impersonate Kim, but I'm sure you all know what she sounds like. And I love Kim, but that way of speaking can be a bit annoying. Then we'll talk about pace. So pace is also important. Again, while I mentioned that faster speakers can be seen as more intelligent, there is an upper level, as we all know, and it has to do with clarity and diction. So it's about 150 words a minute is perfect. I'm probably going faster than that now. Perfect is hard. But it's something that you can practice and get used to and feel comfortable slowing down your pace so that you're very clear and understandable. This is also true of diction, making sure that you're enunciating your words. And we'll go through some concrete tips that anyone can do at home. So the worst and best is to record yourself speaking freestyle and figure out, how quickly you're speaking, how many ums and ahs you're using. You can also get a trusted advisor to help you understand where your pitch is and if it might sound more professional if you were to lower it a bit. It's hard for like a close loved one to do that, but certainly you can get maybe a colleague to help you out, which is asking a friend. You can hire a speech coach, of course. I'm sure that would pay dividends. You can join a club like Toastmasters, which is a public speaking group, and there are others out there to help you practice. You can do my favorite, which is this app called Speako, which tells you how fast you're speaking, where your ums and ahs are, where you're falling short on diction, and gives you exercises to practice. Other practicing is like reading passages aloud, timing yourself to understand pace, using tongue twisters, she sells, seashells, and also using the tongue twister and inserting the word and, she, and, sells, and, seashells, and, which helps you get the pace without the content so that you can really start to feel how natural it is at that speed. Then we'll talk about your physical location. Here I am in my very beautifully styled desk. So physical location, this is frankly like an accessory at this point. What's in your background and what you're showing to other people is saying a lot about how professional you are, how seriously you're taking this moment in time, and what kind of person you are. I'm actually not a huge fan of virtual backgrounds. I think they can be distracting, and what are you hiding, particularly because it's so easy to just blur it out if you are in a place that you can't really control. But they obviously have their uses, like right now. It's essential that you're thinking about it and you're taking the time to clean up your space. But it's also nice sometimes to have something personal in the background, something that says, oh, look, I'm interested in the guitar, or I have this cool piece of art behind me. It depends on the context of your interview, because sometimes you want to be super, super professional. And sometimes you're really looking for that opportunity to connect on something else. So again, use your background like an accessory. It's there to let you add another piece to the conversation. Is it obnoxious to have your diplomas on your background wall? You know, I think so. Also, you can't really see them. So now they just know that you have your diploma, but they can't really see your diploma. And everyone's checking your LinkedIn or your resume anyway. So it's not my favorite thing. But if it feels right to you, then that's who you are and it feels right. Sorry, it's funny to see the chats on the other window. Yeah, exactly. Jessie said she has a cat tree that people ask about, and it's definitely a great conversation starter. I mentioned camera angle, but obviously you want to be looking right at the camera. And so I think, this conveys you want a well-lit. Lighting is important. Definitely top lighting is just so unflattering. It's not necessarily that it's unprofessional, you just don't look good. So why would you want to do that? Speaking of distractions, as I just got distracted, they're going to happen. We all know that. The kid, the dog, the Amazon delivery guy bursts into your meeting. This is fine. We know this to be fine. It happens to everyone, but it's how you roll with it. And that goes back to, again, nonverbal cues. Does that stress you out? Are you someone who can't handle changes? Or do you roll with it? Apologize, keep moving. That's the kind of thing that you want to just take a moment to be cool and convey the kind of person that they want to see. So I think it's 4:35. We can talk about your virtual self quickly. So we couldn't talk about interviewing without talking about your virtual self, because this is a huge part of who you are on the internet and who you are in a job interview. Many, many recruiters and hiring managers are checking you out online. And if you have a public profile, this is kind of fair game. But we've also seen the maelstrom of what happens if you post something, a tweet when you're 18, and that maybe you couldn't stand behind now, but you've forgotten about it because people don't generally go through their entire Twitter and check it out. And now you're going to get publicly fired because unfortunately that's, an inappropriate comment. So it's definitely something you want to keep control of. Check out your public profiles and make sure that they fit with the person you are today and the person that's interviewing for this role. This is really, again, it's back to empathy. Put yourself in the perspective of your future employer and what are they thinking when they see that? So that's kind of negative. There's also some massive positives to your virtual self and how you can optimize for that. So obviously you can get knowledgeable about the industry and show people that you're knowledgeable about the industry with the things you post on LinkedIn or Twitter, the things you like, comment, all of those things. And it allows you to get really knowledgeable. And you never before had the opportunity to see what the CEO of the company you're interviewing at is thinking, but now he or she is tweeting up a storm and you get all this perspective on what they think is valuable on social media. This is true of your interviewers. I'm sure you've all seen that you can see on LinkedIn or on Twitter, what they're liking and posting and commenting on. So who are they trying to be online and what interests them? I was interviewing at a big tech firm and the hiring manager, and it was a relatively long process, as we were going through, started posting a ton of stuff about the industry and lots of first person point of view. And it didn't really fit with the firm's position. I thought this is kind of strange. Lo and behold, well, one, I didn't get the job. Two, a few months later, he left for their biggest competitor. And I thought, oh, that's what that was about. So you can get a lot of information from what people are posting online. You can also network really easily. We're doing it right now. This is a great community. There's many other great communities out there. None as great as Products by Women, but and you can meet different people and harness their interests, and you can find mentors. I think people find it hard to reach out to a mentor out of the blue and ask them, will you be my mentor? But if you think about how people can find their soulmate by like liking their Instagram posts and slipping into their DMs, that's not so different in a professional relationship. Comment on their posts, like their posts, understand their point of view, and then wait to start building a one-on-one relationship when you have something really valuable to say about something that they're interested in. So if you have 3 takeaways from this presentation, I want them to be, it's okay to be vain about how you present yourself on Zoom. There are still body language cues virtually, theirs and yours, so pay attention and use them. And then lastly, storytelling is harder. So you want to be a star, and be aware of all the other things that are telling a story in your physical environment. So thanks so much for listening to me. If you want to hear more of my thoughts on remote work and leadership, you can follow me on LinkedIn or on Instagram, where I talk a little bit more about like what to wear for Zoom calls and how much makeup is too much makeup in a Zoom call. And yeah, I think, Nanisha, we're gonna do some questions that people can chat.
Absolutely. And you know, feel free to jump up, you know, put your questions in the chat box or raise your hands. And while you're doing that, I want to kick it off by asking one question, mainly specific to storytelling, you know, for any of those people who are kind of going through the motions of interviews or rising up the ranks from a mid-career level to a senior leadership, how can someone really hone in to their storytelling skills?
So I think there's a couple of ways to do this, and hopefully maybe they worked for me. One of the ways I like to do it, though, is to watch videos of great speakers. You know, you can go through, and there are some TED Talks that are phenomenal, and you think that person really nailed it. You can also see some TED Talks where you're like, I can't believe they let this person on stage. Like, this is not very well told. And so really trying to take note of what you think makes a good story. I think focusing on that beginning, middle, and end. And then the other thing is really practice. You know, it takes so much more effort to tell a good story than you think it does. It should be written down. You should be editing it. You should be making it faster, smoother. That practice, I think, is the most important part. And then you get better at understanding what the audience likes, whoever the audience is.
Thank you for that. And, you know, I also wanted to touch on this one misconception that I had personally, which was when I started off my journey of like speaking at like, I make an effort to go and speak at different forums. My assumption and the initial few talks that I gave, I remember being really nervous. It was not something that came very naturally to me. And that part of it, like I remember talking to a mentor of mine who was the CEO of my previous organization, and she said, you know, it never comes naturally to anyone. Everybody practices. And I feel like our misconception of thinking that it comes naturally to everybody, I really wanted to talk about it. Like, how much do you think it comes naturally? And of course, it does come naturally to a few people, and they're amazing speakers. But what are your thoughts about this?
I think the coming naturally is great. If you're really good, and I'm sure we've all seen that happen. I was at an event and I saw 2 major CEOs speak, and it happened to be a man and a woman. And the man got up there and he was like, God, that skill must have been present when you were 19. You're so good. I'm sure he's subsequently been coached. And then the woman was not a natural, but she'd very much been coached. And this was the best you could do if you were not a natural. And for being persuasive and showing people like, this is important information, I want to convince you of it. Sometimes the effort, visible effort, is more important than natural ability. You're not a politician. You're not getting people to vote for you. And showing when you're very well rehearsed, even if it comes off as a little forced, or you're doing things that are like very taught gestures with your hands, people know that you're giving it your all. And that's important. It's important waiting in the office. So I think that visible effort that comes with practice actually has like a knock-on effect of showing how seriously you're taking the project at hand.
I love that. And there's a question that came in from Michelle, which talks about, can you share some recent memorable candidates you've interviewed? What was it about that person that really stood out?
Yeah, that is a very good question. I think it's probably true of virtual and not virtual candidates in that confidence in your answers really shines through. And this goes back probably to practice and feeling like you're prepared to answer that question. And that even if you're not prepared, you know that your experience is good enough that it doesn't matter. I do think that the emphasis on ability to be a clear speaker and to be extremely structured in your answers, and particularly that idea of like, tell you what you're going to tell them what you told them, and then tell them what you told them. Summary at the end makes it really easy to understand what someone's saying. And that is, some of that's training. You really have to practice that with another person, but those are the clearest answers. You're like, yes, I get it. Thank you.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you. There's another question which came in about dressing, right? Like, there are so many different organizations, especially now working from home. It's really difficult to assess. Like, of course, if you're interviewing with a Goldman Sachs, you're going to be wearing a suit. But then for tech firms, right? Like, how do you know what is appropriate? Like, is it okay for me to wear like a t-shirt? Like, any thoughts about that for an interview?
Yeah, I think for those of us, I was at the Financial Times, which is super formal, men in suits. And now I'm at a 9-person startup, which is not super formal. And I think there is that little bit of like knowing your audience. Is this Goldman Sachs or is this a startup? But do you want to get it wrong? Do you want to be in the t-shirt or the hoodie? Again, I think I mentioned this, like, you do you be you, and we should all feel free to be anyone we want to be. On the other hand, is it going to be a little bit better if you look a little more professional? I think, and again, I cover this like so much on Instagram. I get so many votes and like polls. I think for the most part, putting on a little something that looks nice on camera, that looks like you're trying, it shows respect. And it's also for you. This is different. This is a new moment in time. This is something I'm really putting myself forth for. So I do think it's better to err on the side of like a little nicer than a t-shirt. But you're probably gonna look like a big doofus if you're wearing a suit to interview at a very techie startup. So finding that middle ground that feels comfortable for you, but shows that you're taking this seriously.
Yeah, no, that was going to be my next question. Like, what if I'm overdressed for the interview, but you covered it? Well, I wanted to also speak a little bit about coaching, right? Like, I have never taken any formal coaching. How important is it for someone to invest in coaching? And how have you taken coaching? Has it been helpful? Do you know people who kind of worked with an executive coach about their presence for anything like that? Any thoughts there?
So I have done executive presence training, not with a coach, but like as a part of work. And then I insist on doing it at my previous role where I've managed teams. I insist on bringing it in for my team because I think everyone can benefit from it. I'm a marketer by trade. Obviously, you don't usually do so many presentations externally in marketing, but if we're talking about how to be persuasive, what are your tics? Should you lower your pitch? Those are things that a professional can really help you with. And also, if you are a manager, I mean, it's an amazing team building experience because it's both beneficial and a little bit nerve-wracking. Nobody likes to get up there and do it. So yes, I have done it, and I would love to do more. I think it's something you can always be getting better at. But you can also use Speako, which, thank you for typing that in. I cannot recommend the app more. I don't know them. I'm not getting paid for this. I love it.
I had no clue about Speako, so thank you for sharing that information. The other question I had was specific to social media, Instagram, right? Like, how does one know what they should be sharing and what they should not be sharing? Like, my personal Instagram does have my personal information. Like, it has baby pictures, it has things about my vacation, it has stuff about products by women as well. So how do you know you're giving out the right information when someone's actually stalking you or like following you on Instagram?
Yeah. So I think the personal life stuff, I think, is fine. Nobody is even batting an eye at that. And I think we're seeing with Gen Z, the people that I've managed that have been, significantly younger than me, there's such an openness to posting things where I'm like, wow, I would never, because weird hangups, would never post that bathing shoot shot of myself. But I'm so impressed with your confidence. And I think that is becoming much more normal. I think it's when it veers into the political, that can be more ripe for issues. And obviously, if you are like bullying or putting things out there, it's particularly the interactions, that can be more negative. I think also Instagram, you might get a quick glance at someone, but if you have an employer who's like diving really deep into your Instagram to find something offensive, that's probably a red flag, frankly, about what they're looking for. That's not necessarily used as like a professional tool. Your LinkedIn, totally fair game. But who has time to go through the whole thing? Actually, I see some like back and forth on the tech interview. And I think actually Michelle made a good point, you know, you can wear a t-shirt, but don't wear a streetwear t-shirt or hoodie that might not be the interviewer's vibe. And I think this kind of embodies what I'm trying to say in a better way, that like, you kind of don't want your outfit to say anything. You don't really want it to be noticeable, unless you do. If you're willing to do that, great. But the default is don't let it say anything. Wear a white t-shirt, wear a white collared shirt, just go totally neutral. And then you don't have to debate, what am I saying with this outfit?
Absolutely. Unless, you know, our previous speaker in one of our you know, past events actually wore a cute hat saying fluent in Figma, and she was presenting on design, which was amazing, and it's on point. So yeah. It's a conversation starter for sure.
Exactly.
I do want to give everybody the opportunity to raise their hands, and don't feel shy. Feel free to come up and ask questions directly. You know, while we're here, I do also want to, you know, talk a little bit about building that human connection. You know, it oftentimes really, really hard to do that over the phone, over a call. But, you know, given the limitations one has, apart from kind of asking more about the person, are there any other tips that you suggest? Is it obnoxious to say in an interview, hey, I checked out your LinkedIn, so I know this is what you do? Like, is that a no? Is that weird to say? Like, what are your thoughts about that?
I don't think so. I am the queen of doing this, even in social settings. Oh, I've seen you on Instagram. And because it happens, we all know it happens. The algorithms are showing us people, everyone's checking everyone out. And again, I think it shows an interest in the person. And again, goes back to if you dived really deep in someone's page and you're like, oh, 7 years ago, you posted something on Instagram, that verges into weird. But we're doing these things on social media to be seen. And so the fact that you are seeing them is you seeing me. You are interacting with the person that I want to be in a professional sense. So I think that that's very flattering. And I do think, you know, you said it, and you said beyond asking questions. That's it. Ask people questions. Ask them to talk about themselves. That's what gets people going, and then makes you ironically feel very connected to someone.
That's awesome. And there's another question which came in specifically about the quality of a webcam and a mic. Does that matter? And I do have something to add on. One of my coworkers actually invested in a high definition video camera. And immediately everybody who talks with him is like, hey, how's your camera that good? So yeah, what are your thoughts about this?
I think it makes a huge difference. Given the technology limitations, I think, and the fact that we're always half the time in the meeting dealing with like a broadband issue, I don't know that the camera gives you so much more. I think I also feel this way about HD TV. You know, do I need to see that? It's not giving me many more inputs, verbal, nonverbal cues. The audio, though, that's huge. And if your audio isn't good, and I've said this many times in different forums, you can have a call without video. You can't have a call without audio. So you really need to make sure that your mic is up to scratch, the background noise is as diminished as possible. And then are you communicating verbally? Because otherwise you're truly at zero.
Well, thank you. Those were my questions. We are at the 7:50 mark. Michelle, do you have any questions? I wanted to give you the opportunity to ask any questions you may have.
No, I think that was great. I just I liked the back and forth chatter in the chat about the dress attire, because I think I thought about that a lot too. But after speaking to a lot of tech people, I actually spoke to someone about it a few days ago, because they were going for an interview for the first time in a tech role, and they were wearing like a really formal shirt. And I do think that it can be off-putting to an interviewer if you're wearing something like really, really formal and they're showing up in their like t-shirt or hoodie. So it's definitely something to think about. I think you can find it a lot with people's personal brands too. So for example, like my friend like Swish, he on his LinkedIn profile, he's literally wearing like a t-shirt and a hat. And so a lot of the time you can just look up your interviewer and see kind of their vibe and what they wear on a regular basis and kind of just mimic it anyways, and you'll probably be good. And if you're doing something in tech, like be comfortable wearing. The first time I did an interview in tech, I just wore a white t-shirt because I was like, it's a t-shirt, but it's not like it says anything on it. There's no brand associated with it. It's just a t-shirt. And even if it's like a little bit more upscale, like no one's going to say anything. It's still a white t-shirt. A white t-shirt is like so neutral, or a black t-shirt. So that's like my 2 cents on the topic.
I actually just have one thought that I didn't share, which is related to that. In a normal work environment, you can't help it, right? Because if you work at a more formal company and then you're going over to a tech company to interview, you might be wearing a suit. There's nothing you can do about that. And like, I've certainly had it happen so many times, and I've never judged anyone for that instance. At home, you know, people are just kind of wearing whatever they want. So putting on a suit does say a little bit more. I also will say, I don't know how many like junior people there are on this call, but I've only seen it as a positive for like a junior candidate. Like it shows that you're really excited about the role, and that you're taking it really seriously. And if you haven't had a lot of roles, like maybe this is something new to you. And so I would never ding someone for that. I think the farther you get in a career, there's a bigger expectation that you'd understand about the culture you're walking into.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for this amazing talk and your time, McKenna. For everyone here, please follow McKenna on LinkedIn, send her a request, follow her on Instagram. If you have any other questions that we didn't get to, please reach out to her, and also reach out to Michelle if you have any questions about Flick. Michelle, if you want to share that information about the role that you're hiring for, again, that'll be great. And before you do that, I do want to say that the company that I work for, Huge, is also hiring for product managers and senior product managers. So if any of you are looking for roles actively at an agency, reach out to me on Instagram or LinkedIn. I don't know why I said reach out to me on Instagram, but yeah, reach out to me on LinkedIn, but Instagram's totally fine as well. And I'm happy to refer you internally if it's a good fit. Michelle, anything else that you want to say before you close out?
No, yeah, I just put our careers page there, and we're hiring for a project manager, digital marketer, product development intern, and 2 full stack developers and a designer. If you are interested in any of these roles, and we are hiring for a digital product development intern, if that's something that you're interested in, Katya. But we will probably be hiring for more marketing interns moving forward as well. So keep updated on our careers page.
Amazing. And McKenna, do you want to close it out with any parting words?
Good luck for all of you that might be interviewing, or, you know, it'll be all of us again one day. So you got this.
Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great night. Bye. See you.